Welcome to Trench Diaries. This is Stuka Pilot, Chapter 2. Slowly, Operation Crete draws to its conclusion. I am told to fly a damaged aircraft to a repair shop at Cottbus and wait there for further orders. Back again to Germany over Sofia and Belgrade. I am left at Cottbus without news of the squadron and without any idea as to what they intend to do with me. During the last few days, there have been constant rumors of a new campaign based on the fact that numerous ground crews and flying formations as well have been moved east. Most of those with whom I discuss these rumors believe that the Russians are going to allow us to push forward across Russia to the Near East so that we can get near the oil fields, other raw materials and war potential of the Allies from this side. But all this is the merest speculation. At 4 a.m. on June the 22nd, I hear on the radio that war with Russia has just been declared. As soon as it is daylight, I go into the hangar where the aircraft belonging to the Immelmann squadron are under repair and ask if any one of them is serviceable. Shortly before noon, I have attained my object and now nothing holds me back. My squadron is believed to be stationed somewhere on the East Prussian-Polish frontier. I land first at Insterburg to make enquiries. Here I get the information from the Luftwaffe High Command. The place I am bound for is called Rashi and lies to the southeast. I land there half an hour later among a crowd of aircraft which have just returned from a sortie and are about to take off again after being overhauled. The place is crawling with aircraft. It takes me quite a while to find my last squadron, which had rather cold-shouldered me when we were in Greece and which I had not seen since. They have not much time for me at Squadron HQ, they have their hands full with operations. The CO tells me via the adjutant to report to the first flight. There I report to the flight commander, a flying officer who has also been in the doldrums and welcomes me, if for no other reason than because the squadron has branded me a black sheep. As he is now skeptical of everything told to him by his colleagues in the squadron, I have the initial advantage that he is not ill-disposed towards me. I have to hand over the aircraft I brought with me from Cottbus, but am allowed to join the next sortie flying an ancient aeroplane. From now on, I am dominated by only one idea. I am going to show all of you that I have learned my job and that your prejudice is unjust. I fly as number 2 behind the flight commander, who has detailed me to look after the technical requirements of the flight when not on operations. With the assistance of the senior fitter, it is my business to see that as many aircraft as possible are serviceable for each sortie and to maintain liaison with the engineer officer of the squadron. During operations, I stick like a burr to the tail of my number 1's aircraft so that he becomes nervous of my ramming him from behind until he sees that I have mine thoroughly under control. By the evening of the first day, I have been out over the enemy lines 4 times in the area between Grodno and Volkovysk. The Russians have brought up huge masses of tanks together with their supply columns. We mostly observed the types KV-1, KV-2 and T-34. We bombed tanks, flak artillery and machine gun ammunition supplying the tanks and infantry. Ditto the following day, taking off at 3 a.m. and coming in from our last landing often at 10 p.m. A good night's rest goes by the board. Every spare minute we stretch out underneath an aeroplane and instantly fall asleep. Then, if a call comes from anywhere, we hop to it without even knowing where it is from. We move as though in our dreams. On my very first sortie, I noticed the countless fortifications along the frontier. The fieldworks run deep into Russia for many hundreds of miles. They are partly positions still under construction, and we fly over half-completed airfields. Here a concrete runway is just being built, there a few aircraft are already standing on an aerodrome. For instance, on the road to Vitebsk, along which our troops are advancing, there is one of these half-finished airfields packed with Martin bombers. They must be short either of petrol or crews. Flying in this way over one airfield after another, over one strongpoint after another, one reflects. It is a good thing we struck when we did. It looks as if the Soviets meant to build all these preparations up as a base for invasion against us. Whom else in the West would Russia have wanted to attack? If the Russians had completed their preparations, there would not have been much hope of halting them anywhere. We are fighting in front of the spearhead of our armies. That is our task. We stay for short periods at Ula, Lepel and Janowice. Our targets are always the same: tanks, motor vehicles, bridges, fieldworks and AA sites. On and off, our objectives are the enemy's railway communications or an armored train when the Soviets bring one up to support their artillery. All resistance in front of our spearheads has to be broken so as to increase the speed and impetus of our advance. The defense varies in strength. The ground defense is in the main considerable, ranging from infantry small arms fire to flak, not to mention machine gun fire from the air. The only fighter aircraft the Russians have at this time is the Rata J-15, very much inferior to our Mi-109. Wherever the Ratas put in an appearance, they are shot down like flies. They are no serious match for our Messerschmitts, but they are easy to maneuver and, of course, a great deal faster than we Stukas. Consequently, we cannot afford entirely to ignore them. The Soviet operational air force, its fighter and bomber units, is remorselessly destroyed both in the air and on the ground. Their fighting power is small, their types like the Martin bomber and the DB-3 mostly obsolete. Very few aircraft of the new type P-2 are to be seen. It is not until later that American deliveries of the twin-engine Boston are noticeable even on this front. We are frequently subjected to raids by small aircraft at night with the object of disturbing our sleep and interrupting our supplies. Their evident successes are generally few. We get a taste of it at Lepel. Some of my colleagues sleeping under canvas in a wood are casualties. Whenever the wire crates, as we call the little wire-braced biplanes, observe a light, they drop their small shrapnel bombs. They do this everywhere, even in the front line. Often they shut off their engines so as to make it difficult to locate them and go into a glide, then all we can hear is the wind humming through the wires. The tiny bomb drops out of the silence and immediately the engines begin to purr again. It is less a normal method of warfare than an attempt to fray our nerves. The flight has a new skipper, Flight Lieutenant Steen. He joined us originally from the same formation in which I received my first instruction in flying a Stuka. He gets accustomed to my sticking close behind him like a shadow on a sortie and keeping only a few yards distance even when diving. His marksmanship is excellent. If he misses the bridge, it is a certainty I shall hit it. The flight aircraft following us can then drop their bombs on the AA guns and other targets. He is delighted when the squadron at once give him their opinion of his pet lambs, among which I am included. He makes no bones about it when one day they ask him, "Is Rudel okay yet?" When he replies, "He is the best man I have in the flight." There are no more questions. He recognizes my keenness, but on the other hand, he gives me only a short lease of life because I am apparently crazy. The term is used half in jest. It is the appreciation of one airman by another. He knows that I generally dive too low a level in order to make sure of hitting the target and not to waste ammunition. That is bound to land you in trouble in the long run, is his opinion. By and large, he may be right. If it were not that at this time I am having a run of luck. But one gains experience with every fresh sortie. I owe a lot to Steen and count myself fortunate to be flying with him. In these first few weeks, however, it looks very much as if he is likely to be proved right in his predictions. In low-level attacks on a road along which the Russians are advancing, damage by enemy flak compels one of our aircraft to make a forced landing. Our comrade's aircraft comes down in a little clearing surrounded on three sides by scrub and Russians. The crew take cover behind their machine. I can see the Russian machine gun bursts spattering up the sand. Unless my colleagues are picked up, they are lost. But the Reds are right among them. What the hell, I must bring it off. I lower my landing flaps and already I am gliding down to land. I can spot the Ivan's light grey uniforms amongst the bushes. Whang! A burst of machine gun fire hits my engine. There seems no sense in landing with a crippled aircraft. If I do, we shall not be able to take off again. My comrades are done for. Their waving hands are the last I see of them. The engine conks like mad, but picks up and is running just sufficiently for me to pull out on the other side over a copse. The oil has plastered the window of my cockpit, and I expect a piston seizure at any moment. If that happens, my engine will stop for good. The reds are below me, they throw themselves on the ground in front of my kite while some of them shoot at it. The flight has climbed to nearly 1,000 feet and it is out of range of the tornado of small arms fire. My engine just holds out till I reach our front line, there I land. Then I hare back to base in an army lorry. Here Officer Cadet Bauer has just arrived. I know him from my time with the reserve flight at Graz. He later distinguishes himself and is to be one of the few of us who survived the campaign. But this day on which he joins us is an unlucky one. I damaged the right wing plane of my aircraft because when taxiing in, I am blinded by the thick swirl of dust and collide with another aircraft. That means I must change my wing plane, but there is not one on the airfield. They tell me that a damaged aircraft is still standing on our last runway at Ulla, but it still has a sound right-wing plane. Steen is furious with me. You may fly when your aircraft is serviceable again and not a minute earlier. To be grounded is the severest punishment. Anyhow, we have flown the last sortie for today and I fly back at once to Ulla. 2 mechanics from another flight have been left behind there, they help me. During the night we take off the wing planes with the assistance of a couple of comrades from the infantry. We are through by 3 in the morning. All one needs is a break. I report my return with a whole aircraft in time for the first sortie at 4:30. My skipper grins and shakes his head. A few days later I am transferred to the 3rd Squadron as engineer officer and have therefore to bid the first flight goodbye. Steen cannot pull any strings to stop my transfer, and so I am now engineer officer of the 3rd Squadron. I have barely arrived when the squadron commander leaves the unit and a new one takes his place. Who is he? Flight Lieutenant Steen. All one needs is a break. Your transfer was only half as bad as you thought. You see that now. Yes, it is a mistake to be too eager to tempt Providence, says Steen as he greets me. When he joins us in the squadron mess tent for the first time at Janowice, there is the dickens of a racket going on. An ancient LAC had been trying to fill his lighter from a large petrol tin. He does it by tilting the tin with the result that the petrol spills over the lighter, whereupon he keeps flicking it to see if it is already working. There is a terrific bang, the tin explodes in his face, and the LAC pulls a face as if the explosion were a breach of military regulations. A sad waste of good petrol, for many old women are only too glad to swap eggs for a little petrol. This is of course forbidden because petrol is meant for other uses than the concoction of spirituous liquor by old women. Even one drop of the stuff they manufacture burns our skin. Everything is a question of habit. The chancel of the village church has been converted into a cinema, the nave into a stables. Different people, different customs, says Flight Lieutenant Steen with a chuckle. The great motor road from Smolensk to Moscow is the objective of many of our sorties. It is crowded with immense quantities of Russian material. Lorries and tanks are parked there beside one another at the closest intervals, often in 3 parallel columns. If this mass of material had poured over us, I cannot help thinking as I attack this sitting target. Now, in a few days' time, it will be all a vast sea of wreckage. The advance of the army goes forward irresistibly. Soon we are taking off from Durovchina, a place north of the railway station of Yarzevo, the possession of which is later hotly contested. On one of the following days a Rata dives from above into our formation and rams Bauer. The Rata crashes and Bauer flies home with a severely damaged aircraft. That evening the Moscow radio sings a hymn of praise for the Soviet pilot officer who rammed and brought down a Stuka swine. The radio must be right, and we since childhood have always enjoyed listening to fairy tales. About 2 miles away from us, the army is preparing a new major operation. So, quite unexpectedly, we receive orders to move to another area. Our new station is called Rehilbitzi and lies some 90 miles west of Lake Ilmen. From dawn till dusk, we support the army to the east and to the north. Chapter 3. Bad weather flying. At Rehilbitzi, the summer months are very hot. The minute we come off duty, we lie down on our camp beds in the coolness of our tents. Our skipper is living with us under canvas. We have not much to say to each other, but we have a feeling of mutual understanding. We must be essentially alike in character. In the evenings after operations, he strolls off into the forest or across the steppe, and if I do not accompany him, I am pretty sure to be either putting the weight or throwing the discus or taking a long distance run around the airfield. These are the ways in which each of us finds recreation after a hard day's flying and is fresh for the next day. Afterwards, we sit about in our tent. He's not much of a drinker and does not hold it against me that I do not drink at all. After reading a book for a while, he will look up at someone in the circle and remarks, "Well, Weinecke, you must be pretty well fagged out, no?" And before one can deny it, "All right then, let's turn in." So we always go to bed early, and that suits me. Live and let live is his motto. Steen's previous experiences have been much the same as mine. He has profited by them and is determined to be a better CO than those he served under. On operations, he exerts a peculiar influence over us. He dislikes heavy flak just as much as the rest of us, but no defense can be so strong as to make him drop his bombs from a greater altitude. He is a grand fellow, and exceptionally good officer, and a first-rate airman, a combination of virtues which makes him a very rare bird. Steen has the oldest rear gunner in our formation, Warrant Officer Lehmann. I have the youngest, Corporal Alfred Scharnowski. Alfred is the 13th child of a simple East Prussian family. He seldom speaks, and perhaps for that reason, nothing ruffles him. With him, I never have to worry about enemy fighters, for not even Ivan can be as dour as Alfred. Here at Rehelbitze, we sometimes get storms of terrific violence. Over vast areas, Russia has a continental climate, and the blessing of cooler weather has to be paid for by thunderstorms that are thunderstorms. It suddenly gets pitch dark in the middle of the day, and the clouds hang almost on the ground. The rain comes down in sheets. Even on the ground, visibility is reduced to a few yards. As a rule, when in the air, we give the storm centers a wide berth. It seems, however, inevitable that one day or another I shall get a close view of all of this. We are giving offensive and defensive support to the army in the Luga sector of the front. Occasionally, we are also sent out on operational missions far into the interior. The objective of one of those missions is the railway station at Chudovo, a very important junction on the Leningrad-Moscow line. We know the enemy's flag and fighter strength from earlier missions there. The AA defense is heavy, but unless fresh fighter formations have recently arrived in this area, we do not anticipate any particular surprises. Just before we take off, a formation of Russian battle aircraft, which we call Iron Gustavs, attack our airfield. We tumble into the split trenches behind our aircraft. Pilot Officer Stahl is the last to jump in, and he lands right in the small of my back. That, indeed, is more uncomfortable than the Iron Gustav's raid. Our flak opens up on them, Gustav jettisons his bombs and makes off at low level. Then we take off, setting a northwestern vector at an altitude of 9,000 feet. Not a cloud in the sky. I am flying as number 2 behind the skipper, and during flight I bring my wing plane level with his and look straight into his cockpit. His face is calm confidence personified. After a while, the deep blue of Lake Ilmen sparkles ahead of us. How many times have we come this way, to Novgorod at the northern end of the lake, or near Staya Rusa to the south? Both are key points, and with a rush, memories of the tight corners we have been in comes to mind. As we approach our objective, a sheer black wall of storm blots out the horizon. It is just before or beyond our target? I don't know. I see Flight Lieutenant Steen studying his map, and now we are flying through a development of dense cloud, the advance guard of the storm front. I cannot make out the target. It must therefore lie below the storm. According to the clock, we should now be very near it. In this monotonous landscape, the tattered clouds increase the difficulty of finding one's bearings by eye. For seconds we are in darkness, then it is light again. I close up to an interval of perhaps 3 to 6 feet so as not to lose sight of the wing plane of my skipper's aircraft in the clouds. If I do, I run the risk of a collision. Why doesn't Steen turn back? Surely we shall not try to attack in this storm. It wouldn't be possible. The flights behind us have already taken positions, evidently with the same idea in mind. Perhaps the skipper is trying to find the enemy's front line on the map with the intention, maybe, of attacking some target there. He loses a little height, but there are banks of cloud at every level. Steen looks up from his map and suddenly bangs round at an angle of 180 degrees. He has presumably given heed to the bad weather situation, but of course does not reckon with the nearness of my wing plane. My reaction is instantaneous. I bank sharply and still more sharply and so avoid a collision. I have turned over so far that I am almost flying upside down. My aircraft is carrying 700-kilogram bombs, and now this weight pulls my aircraft at a terrific speed onto her nose, and I disappear in the inky sea of clouds. It is pitch dark all around me. I hear the whistling and the howling of the wind. Rain pours into the cockpit. From time to time, a flash of lightning illuminates everything bright as day. Fierce gusts of wind shake and rattle the aircraft and send violent shudders through the structure. No ground is visible, and there is no horizon by which I can ride my aircraft. The needle of the vertical speed indicator has ceased to oscillate. The ball and arrow, which indicate the aircraft's position in relation to its lateral and longitudinal axes, and which should be nicely one above the other, are both in one corner of the dial. The vertical speed indicator points to 0. The airspeed indicator accelerates with every second. I must do something to bring the instruments back into a normal position, and that as quickly as possible, for the altimeter shows that we are racing madly downwards. The airspeed indicator soon registers 375 miles per hour. It is clear that I am in an almost perpendicular dive. I read on the illuminated figures of the altimeter. 6,900, 6,600, 6,000, 5,400, 5,100, 4,100, 4,500 feet. At this rate, it is only a matter of seconds before there will be a crash, and that will be the end. I'm in a sweat, and water just pours off me. In fact, is it rain or is it sweat? 3,900, 3,300, 2,400, 1,800, 1,500 on the altimeter. Gradually, I succeed in getting the other instruments functioning properly, except for an alarming pressure on the joystick. And so, I continue to hurtle earthwards. The vertical speed indicator is still set at maximum. All this time, I am completely benighted. Ghostly lightning flashes stab the darkness, making it even more difficult to fly by instruments. I pull on the stick with both hands to bring the aircraft back into a horizontal position. Altitude 1,500, 1,200 feet. The blood is throbbing in my temples. I gasp for breath. Something inside me urges me to give up this struggle with the unleashed forces of the elements. Why go on? All my efforts are of no avail anyway. Now, it also strikes me that the altimeter has stopped at 600 feet. It still oscillates feebly like an exhausted barometer. That means the crash will come at any moment, with the altimeter still registering 600 feet. No, carry on dourly with might and main. There, now I am dead, I think. Dead? If I were, I should not be able to think. Besides, I can still hear the noise of the engine. It is still as dark all around as it was before, and now the unruffled voice of Scharnowski, my gunner, says serenely, "It looks as if we had bumped into something or other, sir." Scharnowski's imperturbable calm leaves me speechless. But one thing I know now, I'm still airborne. And this knowledge helps me to go on concentrating. It is true that even at full throttle I travel no faster, but the instruments show that I am beginning to climb, and that is already enough. The compass points due west, not exactly unlucky. It is to be hoped the thing is still working. I keep my eyes rigidly fixed on my instruments, hypnotizing them with all the power of my will. Our salvation depends on them. I have to pull my stick for all I am worth, otherwise the ball pops back into the corner. I handle the aircraft gingerly as if she were a living thing. I coax her out loud and suddenly cannot help thinking of old Shatterhand and his horse Ree. Scharnowski interrupts my thoughts. We have 2 holes in the wings. There are a couple of birch trees sticking out of them. We have also lost a large bit of one aileron and landing flap. I look out and perceive that I have climbed out of the lowest bank of cloud and am now flying above it. We are back in daylight, actually. I see that Scharnowski is right. 2 great holes in the wings on either side reaching to the main spar with small birch saplings sticking through them. The aileron and the landing flap are in the condition described. Now I begin to understand. The air is caught in the wings, which explains the loss of speed. The difficulties in steering are also accounted for. How long will the valiant Ju-87 be able to carry on? I reckon I must be about 30 miles behind the Russian front. Now, and not till now, do I remember my load of bombs. I jettison them, and this makes flying a lot easier. We usually meet with enemy fighters on every sortie. Today, one of them would not have to shoot me down. A dirty look and a few choice curse words would be quite sufficient to do the trick. I cannot discover even one. At last, I am across the front line and slowly approach our airfield. I warn Scharnowski to bail out immediately I give the order in case I find the aircraft no longer controllable. I reconstruct in my mind the recent miracle which has given me an extended lease of life. The storm blew up. After I had got the other instruments back to normal by constantly pulling the stick, I must have been close to the ground at the very moment the aircraft recovered a horizontal position. At this speed, I must have swept along an avenue of birch trees or between two single birches, and that was where I picked up the broken saplings. It was a stroke of uncanny luck that they tore holes exactly in the center of the wings and did not catch the propeller, otherwise it would have become unbalanced and flown off in a matter of seconds. Still, to maintain stability after such a jar and actually to bring me safely home is a thing no aircraft could possibly do except a Ju-87. The return flight takes much too long for my liking, but at last I see Stolzi ahead of me. The tension relaxes sensibly and I stretch my shoulders again. There are some of our fighters at Stolzi and now it will not be long before we are back at our station. Scharnowski, you are to bail out over the airfield. I have no idea what my machine looks like from the ground, nor how the holes in the wings will affect its aerodynamic characteristics when landing. There must be no unnecessary damage now. No, I won't. You'll make it all right, sir, he replies in an almost level voice. What can one answer to that? The airfield is below us. I see it with new eyes. It has a more home-like appearance than usual. There, my Ju can have a good rest. There are my comrades, the familiar faces. Somewhere down there hangs my tunic, and in one of the pockets the last letter received from home. What was it my mother wrote? A chap ought to read his mother's letters through more carefully. The squadron has apparently been paraded for dispersal. Are they perhaps being briefed for another sortie? In that case, we must hurry. Now they are all staring up at our aircraft and moving away. I get ready to land, and in order to have a safety factor, I come in at a pretty fair speed. After taxiing for a considerable distance, I am safely back. Some of the chaps have run alongside us for the last 100 yards. I climb out of the aircraft, so does Scharnowski with perfect nonchalance. Now our colleagues cluster around us and pat us on the back. I hurriedly push my way through this welcoming committee and report to the skipper. Pilot Officer Rudel returning from Ops, special incident, contact with the ground in the target area, aircraft unserviceable. He shakes us by the hand, a smile on his face. Then, with a shake of the head, he walks away towards the squadron tent. Of course we have to repeat the whole story to the others. They tell us that they had just been paraded to hear the skipper deliver a short obituary speech. Pilot Officer Rudel and his crew attempted the impossible. They tried to attack the set target by diving through the storm, and death has claimed them. He was just filling his lungs to start a new sentence when the better Ju-87 appeared on the edge of the airfield. Then he turned even paler and quickly dismissed the parade. Even now in the tent, he flatly refuses to believe that I did not purposely dive into the storm instead of being plunged into pitch-black darkness because I was flying so close to his aircraft when he suddenly banked round. I assure you, sir, it wasn't intentional. Rubbish, you're exactly that kind of idiot. You were absolutely determined to attack the railway station. You overestimate me, sir. The future will prove I was right. Incidentally, we are going out again presently. An hour later, I am flying next to him with another aircraft again in the Lugas sector. In the evening, I work off my inner tension and my physical lassitude in a game. After that, I do something immensely important. I sleep like a top. The following morning, our objective is Novgorod, where the big bridge that spans the Volkhov collapses under our bombs. The Soviets are trying to get as many men and as much material as possible across the Volkhov and the Lovat, which flows into Lake Ilmen from the south, before it is too late. Therefore, we have to keep on attacking the bridges. Their destruction delays the enemy, but not for long. We very soon realized this. Pontoons are quickly constructed in between them, and in this way the Soviets perseveringly patch up the damage we have caused. This constant operational flying without intermission brings on many symptoms of fatigue, sometimes with distressing results. The skipper is very quick at noticing them too. Operational instructions from the wing, transmitted over the telephone at midnight or even later, must now be listened to and taken down by two of us. On more than one occasion, misunderstandings have arisen in the morning for which everyone is convinced that the others blame him. The reason is generally really exhaustion. The CO and I are detailed to listen jointly to the wing's nocturnal briefings. One night the telephone rings in the squadron tent. It is the wing commander on the line. "Sten, we meet our fighter escort tomorrow morning at 5 a.m. over Batjeskoye." The exact point is very important. We hunt for it on the map by the light of a pocket torch, but we find no Batjeskoye. We have no clue as to where to look for it. Our desperation is as vast as Russia. Finally he says, "I'm sorry sir, I can't find the place on the map." Now the wing commander's angry voice yaps in his Berlin accent. "What? You call yourself a squadron leader and don't know where Batjeskoye is?" "Can you please give me the map reading, sir? The coordinates, if you please," says Sten. A lengthy silence, endlessly prolonged. I look at him, he looks at me. Then, suddenly, "Damn it, I don't know where the place is either, but I am putting Pekrun on the line. He knows where it is." His adjutant then quietly explains the exact location of the very tiny village in the Fenlands. A peculiar fellow, our wing commander. When he is angry or when he is particularly trying to be friendly, in either case, he talks like a typical Berliner. Where discipline and systemic operations are concerned, our wing owes him a lot. Things are picking up and Hans-Ulrich has already had to face the aviator's most feared enemy, bad weather. We have heard about this in the other book written by our boy Uli, who also almost crashed multiple times due to underestimating the dangers of thunderstorms. This time, Rudel came out alive, but barely. His plane saved his life by being very durable and transforming into a giant hedge trimmer for a few seconds. The other adversary is what he calls a Rata J-15. What he actually means by this is the Polikarpov J-16 monoplane. The stubby little plane indeed carried the nickname Rata, which just means rat, which it received during the Spanish Civil War, and it stuck. This plane was even more obsolete than the Ju-87, but, just as Rudel talked about, was used for silent glide attacks during the night to harass the Germans. How he came to calling it the J-15 instead the J-16 is a mystery. In any case, if you've made it this far, thank you for watching, consider subscribing, and I will see you next episode. Cheers.